Look at this. It is Thursday. We finally did. We got back to being on a Thursday. It is Thursday. It is 9. UK Cowboys time. And with me is the very beautiful and talented Mr. Lawn. How are we, sir?
Not too bad. Never been called that before, but never mind.
Yeah, you see, I like to bring people up before I bring them down.
Nope.
How's Trex? You all right? I know you haven't been too well lately. You've been under the weather. How are you feeling now?
Yeah, I'm getting over it now. I'm not needing to use the cough button as much, so we're getting there.
The old friendly cough button comes great in handy over here, especially in the UK with the weather we get. But yes, welcome guys. We are deep into the positional breakdown series. Last week it was the draft class. This week is looking at the quarterbacks on the roster. Being that there's only 2 of us and there's only 4 quarterbacks to look at, we'll probably run through this show fairly abruptly. But that's fine. It all means everyone gets an early night. But there's plenty to talk about because there's some news and all the rest of it. As DJ Dog says, one of the things coming up is the schedule, which is ironically out after the show.
Yeah,
never mind.
But 2 a.m. I think it is. It comes out, isn't it?
Yeah. I'm not fancying staying up to find out who plays who when at 2 o'clock. I'll wait for it in the morning and then do it. Right, let's hit the news and updates, and then we can crack on with the show. So let's go with that. It's good to get that transition back.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I've missed them. When you're on the draft, there's no need, the draft shows, no need to use any of that. You're just rolling through it all, trying to get through as much as you can. All right, anyway, we're into the news and updates, guys. So first off, I don't know, right? Let me ask you this, Lord. Do you put much stock into strength of schedule rankings?
No, not really, because, I mean, not at this time of the year, because obviously so much has changed through free agency and the draft. And then, again, as I was saying last week, it can be that you can have the most talented team in terms of potential, and you just don't catch fire, you don't have the culture or something like that, and it just doesn't come together. Obviously, if you were start of the off season, you would say Dallas had a cakewalk to the NFC East. I think what everybody else has done in the draft, I think's made it a little bit harder. I'm not going to say that we're not going to win the East, but certainly, Philadelphia certainly solidified their position.
They closed the gap for sure.
Yeah, and they were a team that obviously made the playoffs last year, and still had high quality first round draft picks, which they then converted into also the signing of AJ Brown as well. So,
yeah, because that'll be interesting. Because here's a funny thing with strength of schedule rankings is obviously they're going off last year's win-loss records to create what essentially how easy your schedule is going to be. And I just think that going off what teams did last year is a terrible way to look at how you're going to be this year. Because Cowboys, as it stands, ranks 32nd in strength of schedule, meaning they have the easiest schedule on paper. But here's a good example of why strength of schedule is a terrible way to look at it, is that the Bengals were touted to have a top 10 draft pick in this year's draft. Turns out they ended up being the Super Bowl runner-up. Like, nobody saw that come in, but yeah,
Yeah.
if you put that in the strength of schedule, people would be like, "Oh, you've got the Bengals, so that's an easy game." Turns out Cowboys have the Bengals on their schedule, but doesn't mean to say the Bengals are going to be Super Bowl caliber, a caliber team, and it also doesn't mean to say that the Cowboys this year, because we're bearing in mind, like you say, Eagles have done well to close the gap, Giants have done their bit, Commanders, we'll talk about that another day, but the Cowboys in the NFC East were 6-0. So you're
Yeah.
saying, based on strength of schedule, the Cowboys have 6 wins in the bag already, and it's not how it works. We know that. I would say, in terms of Eagles, Cowboys versus Eagles, I could see them splitting games this year. That's for
Yeah.
sure.
100%. And I mean, even look at 1989 when we were 1-15. I mean,
Exactly.
we beat the Redskins, and we weren't expected. They were the Redskins at the time, so I'll
At the
get
time.
away with saying that. But
Uh-huh.
we beat them. We weren't expected to, and actually do it in their home at RFK Stadium as well was
Yeah, yeah.
quite something. So, um, you never can, especially with these divisional games, you can never guess what's actually going to happen. There's always
Playbook
going to
goes out the
be
window.
that rivalry that raises the bar ever
Yeah,
so slightly. So,
that's it. Playbook goes out the window on the divisional games. You just got to do whatever you can. But yeah, I just think that in terms of strength of schedule, I just think it's just a terrible way to try and evaluate and predict a team's season. So we posted it up on our social media more than anything. Because it just makes a talking point and to find out where people's mindsets are on it. For me, it's not my way to look at it. I just think it's not very good. But there we go. That's that.
yeah,
In other news, though, we found out some of the schedule as we were talking about. Green Bay, which is week 10, which means that's a November game.
yeah,
That's a good thing. That's good for the Cowboys. Means you're not going all the way up north in December in the colder months when they get like 18 feet of snow up there, and you see Lambeau Field disappearing in a big chunk of ice.
yeah,
So
yeah.
that's a good thing. That's a good thing for the schedule for the Cowboys. Other ones as well, we found out Eagles are the Christmas Eve game, so that's going to make Christmas Eve very interesting.
Yeah,
I think
and at home, so we're not, obviously normally we've been away the latter weeks of the season.
true.
Especially against the NFC East
Yeah,
opponents,
yeah,
it's normally been that. So we'll at least be home for Christmas one way or another.
Mhm.
And as Derek Eagleton said, on Cowboys break yesterday, it means
Yeah.
they're not getting back to Dallas at the same time as Santa Claus is making his deliveries. So
Yeah, that's a good way to do it, and it also means we can enjoy a nice drink in the house, watching the Cowboys beat the Eagles. Get on the
yep,
eggnog, mate. Oh, that's what we should do. We should make eggnog and see who can drink the most Christmas Eve. That's a plan. That's a plan. That's a plan. The wife says no, but I say yes. Anyway, um, there's also rumor, and I'm not too sure. There is a little rumor, and the New York, just so you know, the New York Times and the New York Post are both putting this on their website that the Giants and Cowboys are a Thanksgiving game. Still only speculation and conjecture at this stage. The fact they're reporting it is quite interesting. Puts a little cherry on the top, if you like, with that. Um, we have heard it could be the Bengals too, but that rumor has been swiftly cut with a knife. So
yep.
I don't know. The Giants a Thanksgiving, that would be quite a funky one. I quite like that. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, they've certainly scheduled NFC East opponents before. We've had back-to-back years with Washington,
Mm-hmm.
um, and it certainly adds to some of the excitement. And it certainly gets a crowd in. But
Yeah.
I'd be happy facing either the Bengals or the Giants. You know, the Bengals obviously you got the interest that it's comparing them to the team that obviously came second this year,
Yeah, yeah,
but
yeah.
got at least got to the Super Bowl. So, and
Mhm.
of course Dave Hellman would love it because he'd get to see obviously all of his LSU Tigers. So,
Yeah, practically, eh?
yep,
Um, but yes, so that's some of what we know about the schedule. Just so you know, the schedule is being released tonight or early hours of Friday morning here in the UK and Europe. So take a look and keep an eye out for that. Other news as well. There's been a Cole Beasley rumor running. Have asked the question, and it's more just of the people like to talk. They like to create narratives, is what I've got. And it's like, okay, fair enough. But it has been out there. Eh, as we said before, Lorne, this is the time of year for all of it. You know, especially this week when it's like a very what's the word I'm looking for? Like it's a media low, isn't it? You know, this time of
yeah,
year.
yeah.
People
All the media departments are working, putting the finishing touches to their schedule release videos tonight.
exactly.
You know, there's not a lot being reported. Obviously, you're starting to see some of the draft picks making their signings, so you know that's starting to trickle in, and obviously, but pretty much you know what everybody's going to sign for anyway. It's all slotted, so there's nothing special with it.
Yeah, and it just come through now as well, by the way. Denver Broncos wide receiver Jerry Jeudy has just been arrested.
Oh, gold.
It's just literally come through now. Um, okay, I know that's not Cowboys related, but it literally has just come through as we were talking. Keep an eye on that because that could be quite an interesting situation going on there. In other news, though, with other players, John Ridgeway, I don't know if you've seen this, gave an interview. The part I particularly liked about it is he said he's ready to break necks.
Yep. That's what you want. You want, you know,
True.
that's why Dallas drafted him was that, you know, this guy's got
To
an
break
attitude on him
necks.
and you know, that's the stuff. And I mean, you know, that's only the second draft pick that Jerry's ever used on an Arkansas player. So,
This is true.
um, you know, there's obviously been something there that they've liked about it.
There was Felix
Interest,
Jones.
yeah, interesting. Somebody's been on some of the podcasts this week and asked the same question that he doesn't rate the tape on Ridgeway, but you know, I see him and Bahana. Obviously, Bahana had a roster spot last year. I see Ridgeway effectively taking the sort of Brent Urban roster
Yes.
spot from
Yeah,
last year. So
agree.
you're going to have these two big guys that can handle the run.
Mm.
Um,
And you know the way the Cowboys are moving those pieces up front, it's going to be good to have interchangeable pieces. I know Ridgeway, he's a fairly one-dimensional player in what he's going to be doing in terms of role as that 0-1 tech run stuffer, but um, it will be interesting to see how he's using a rotational way about it. But in terms of roster, because rookie mini camp is starting actually today, which is
yep,
good. They still need to make one more cut to the roster to add their 9 draft players, plus the 20 undrafted free agents, and the additional extra 2 quarterbacks they're bringing in, which we speak about in a moment. The one move, though, and I'm not sure entirely how it works, and I asked the question, nobody's entirely sure themselves, is obviously you have Damone Clark, which we assume is going to start the season on PUP. But does he have to come into the building, at least for a day or whatever, and then they move him to PUP? Or can they just literally, right from now, put him out because then he doesn't count to the roster? Um, that hasn't been done yet. Don't know how those rules work in particular. I'm sure somebody at home is screaming
I,
at us saying it works like this.
I think obviously the two quarterbacks that we've signed for this week,
Yeah,
they literally are a sort of pay as you earn
yeah,
situation. So I
Correct.
don't think they actually take up a spot as such. I mean, obviously one of the quarterbacks was with the Jets last weekend for their rookie minicamp. So,
Yeah.
he didn't obviously they didn't have to create space there. I think we're at the level because we've got the Isaac Alarcon
Hmm.
exemption and we got
Yeah.
rid of Siwu, that
Yeah.
we're at the right level now, so I don't
Yeah.
think we need to make any adjustments. But
Yeah. Because the
perhaps there's somebody else who's signed that I don't know about. But
yeah. Well, I mean, there's the two guys, as you say. Like you said, I don't know if they're sign-ins or they're literally just rookie mini camp arms. My guess is because you can't have a player who's played in a game go to the rookie mini camp. So obviously you can't have Dak, you can't have the other guys, which we're going to talk about at rookie mini camp making throws for wide receivers and tight ends. So you've got to get somebody in. So they do have these two quarterback slash camp arm guys, which is Nick Starkel and Terry Wilson.
yep,
Which, as you say, you looked up just before the show. They're literally, as they say, camp arms to come in to go into rookie camp to be able to do some work because the Cowboys didn't draft or get anyone on the UDFA market that plays the quarterback position. So it could be there is an exemption in that respect too. It's a good point you make on that one as we're talking about it. And I'll have to ask the question on that too. I never really thought to ask that one. But that is the news for now. As we say, the two guys added to the list. Really, the only major points on that, apart from the rookie minicamp starting. Next week, we can give you some more information on those guys, and then we can go into more detail about how rookie minicamp went, talk about the schedule release as well. But that is it for now for the news and updates. We are officially into the position breakdown series quarterbacks. So here's my first question for you, right, Lon?
right, gone.
Think about this time last year with the quarterback position. How does that rate this year in comparison to last year? When you think we had Dak injured, we had Ben Denucci, who's everybody's going, we didn't have Will Grier, and Cooper Rush was, I believe, had he been cut at this point? He was trying to clear waivers.
Yeah,
Because they did cut him, and I think it was about this time of year. So when you think about it, the speculation and the worry and the concern we had this time last year, think about that. How does that rate now in comparison to last year?
I think we've probably got a bit more assurance this year. But I mean, um, from the Dak point of view, obviously he came back from his injury. He got through the first half of the season okay up until the New England game. Was performing at an MVP
Yeah.
esque level.
Hmm.
Unfortunately, he then got injured one way or another in the New England in the last play of the New England game. And at some point he also picked up an injury on his non-throwing shoulder,
That's
which has
correct. Yeah.
required a little bit of work this off season. But he should be back healthy and ready to go this year. We've got concerns about whether he can still be as effective with his legs. But perhaps he just needed that one season to fully recover, and then
Yeah.
he'll be back to the best that we've seen him before.
Yeah.
Um,
Because I mean, like, think about this: that before the calf, like, let's start from the very top. Is that you had Hard Knocks in, and we all saw it. He's doing a lot of throwing. It's his first time throwing since the nasty injury he had from week 4 in 2019 against the Giants with the ankle situation. And he comes back in, he's throwing, and he's making, some would argue, too many throws. But you can get the reasons why, especially with the type of personality that Dak is. And he's in there, he's making all these, and then next thing you hear, he's got a shoulder because he's made too many, he's on a pitch count, he's not happy about it. We see it all unfolding as well on Hard Knocks. It turns out though that when you think like how the season started, up until really the Minnesota game that he didn't play in. That up until that point, like you already illustrated, as you said there, that people were talking about him being in the MVP race.
Yeah. 100%. And I mean, he wasn't lighting up the league in terms of having to pass 500 yards like he was the first four games of
Yeah,
the
sure.
2020 season,
Yeah.
but he was efficient. He was obviously he was having the great games. We
Mm.
had the questionable call on the quarterback keeper against Philadelphia, where I think everybody could see that he'd crossed the line, apart from the line judge and the other officials, and even the replay showed that he was fully over the line. There was things like that. Uh, and obviously, you then had a similar situation where he tried to dive over the line and fumbled the ball. And
Yeah.
again, was he over the line or not? But things like that. And then it just, whether it was taking that week off against Minnesota, or if it was a continuation of the injury that he picked up in the New England game,
Mm.
it just, nothing on the offense seemed to click the same way it did after the bye week.
Yeah. It's a tale of two
Uh,
halves, isn't it, with him? And I don't know if perhaps as well, when you think about it, by the time the Minnesota game came, which Cooper Rush played in and won, you get past that and you start going down the stretch. They have a good way to finish the season. And some people will argue about the teams that they played being a fairly easy cakewalk. But when you think about it, he comes back. And I wonder if maybe because like there were some balls, whichever way you want to look at it, there were balls sailing, and
yeah,
especially on his deep passes, some of them you watch the nose dive on that ball sooner than expected, like as if he's not quite getting enough behind it, and you do see that. And I just wonder if perhaps maybe that calf injury, the calf was a lot more than they were leading on, and it was bothering him, and it's affecting his body mechanics and muscle memory, because that's what throwing really is. And I wonder if that had an effect on it. But I do know one thing that definitely had an effect. Because think about this: how solidified the first 6-7 weeks were of the offensive line. That
yeah,
they weren't rotating out a lot. They were fairly solidified. All right, Lyle Collins had the ban, but it turned out
yeah,
that meant we found out what steel was all about, so it worked out in our favor in that sense. But you look that beyond that, then the offensive line was getting interchanged quite a lot. I mean, it was not just happening game by game, but during the game.
yeah. Yeah, I think everything. To be honest, the whole offense. You can't put it all on Dak, but the
That's for
whole
sure.
offense seemed to be, come the bye week and even the Minnesota game.
Yeah.
You were talking. Lyle came back. You switch Steele to the left hand side as a left tackle
Hmm.
after being 5 or 6 games on the right hand side. You're never going to be able to switch just like that. I
Yeah.
mean, even the best swing tackles will never be able to play almost immediately. They need at least a game to warm up and change the technique from playing left to right or right to left. Um, you had that. We then switched out McGovern for Williams, or switched in McGovern for Williams. Um, Obviously it cut down on some of the penalties, but
Hmm.
we weren't as aggressive on the running game. Zeke had his PCL injury. We had issues with Tony Pollard as well. Everything seemed, it all just seemed to come together at the same time,
Yeah.
and then you lose Gallup as well. And I mean, again, Gallup would have maybe been another option that we had um, against San Francisco as well. You could see him making a sideline catch on that last drive against San Francisco, and that would have, it might have turned out differently. We might not have had to do the QB sneak or
Yeah.
the QB draw with 14 seconds left.
No. And because, like, as well, if you remember the Patriot game when Dak made that throw to land to win the game, and he was on the ground. I don't know about you, but I think everybody was. They were just holding their breath, like, "Oh no, what's just like we've won." You know, like the old "we've won the battle but lost the war" situation.
Yeah,
But I think it's unfair when people say a lot of the problems are with Dak. The one thing I will say, and I don't know what you think on this, Amari Cooper, obviously he's gone. Offensive line is going to be changed quite dramatically when you think with Lyle Collins and Connor Williams
yep,
gone.
yep,
Tyler Biadasz needs to do whatever he needs to do. We'll get to that on the offensive line in positional breakdown series because that's a conversation to be had, that's for sure.
yeah,
But I think we're about to find out this year because they haven't done a lot when you look at it to help Dak succeed. That there's a lot of missing pieces there. Like when you think offensive line could be better, but there's a question mark there. Wide receiver for the Cowboys, which was a strength the last few years, is now probably the biggest question mark next to linebacker on this roster.
yep.
So you've
But
got to think we're going to find out what Dak truly is. Is he a guy that can get that team to be better?
yeah, and I mean, again, I think we discussed this as well when we were talking about why we'd got rid of Amari Cooper, and what this offense might be like. The fact that Dak doesn't have three direct options that
Mm-hmm.
are 1A, 1B, 1C receivers or whatever actually might play out better because again, it's making Dak necessarily think, well, yeah, okay, Amari's open, but is CD Lamb a bit better, open a little bit better, and
Yeah.
having that split second of indecision or something, maybe makes him hold the ball a little bit longer. And, and there's only so many balls that you can throw around the field.
Oh yeah.
So maybe we might see an offense where it's addition by subtraction, where you've got rid of Amari Cooper. Yeah, okay, you don't have teams can double team somebody else, and you're relying on other people to step up. But we might be able to say that nobody knows what Tolbert's like. Nobody knows what James Washington truly is. They
Yeah.
might be absolute steals for us, and we might hit the ground running just as well. And one way or another, Kellen Moore didn't scheme it properly. Um, to get our strengths. And then if you get Zeke back healthy as well, you get Tony Pollard back healthy. You maybe, obviously there's talk that you could maybe use Tony Pollard as the Debo Samuel style
It works.
um, as well. You know,
Yeah.
which obviously Debo Samuel's not wanting to be Debo Samuel of last year. So um, all of this, there's so many questions about the offense going into training camp.
A lot.
Um,
Agree.
but potentially, I mean, it could be a surprise for this season, as far as I'm concerned. I'm actually quite optimistic with everyone looking forward. We do have, I think we don't have 100% improvement, but we have the potential there, and we have upside with the guys that
A
we've
lot of
picked up.
ceiling.
Yep.
Yeah, agree. Yeah. Because it is interesting when you look really through DAC stats. That when you go through it, when you look at all the major categories, Dak is in the top 10 of like literally everything. And it's no lie. Like the most important ones, at least anyway. Like I can just go through some, right. So under pressure, right? Just to go through some of Dak stats, just the easy important ones, right? So when he's under pressure, in terms of rankings in the NFL with all the other quarterbacks, touchdowns under pressure, he ranks fifth. In terms of total yards, passing yards, seventh. In first downs, so that's six. And quarterback rating, is 7th. When he's kept clean, and you'll notice a theme here. Touchdowns, he ranks 5th. Yards, he ranks 9th. First downs, he ranks 8th. Rating, he ranks 7th. When he's blitzed, and I'm sure you can guess where this is going. In touchdowns, he ranks 1st. In first downs, he ranks 5th. In NFL rating, he ranks 6th. So, like, just the really basic, like, you just go and have a look at, like, like those ones really encapsulate a big picture. That when you look at it, he's top 10 in the rankings. And when people talk about how he performed later in the season, yeah, okay, he did what he was trying to do. Because you got to remember, Dak's temperament, when you think about it, is very much, I'm going out to win. I'm going to win. I will win this game. And we've seen it time and time again. So you do get that with him. But it is interesting that when you just go through some basic statistics with him, just pick 4 categories like that. The important ones. How many first downs does he get? How many touchdowns? How many yards does he get? And you go, it's always in the top 10. Everything's always, and that is in a season when he lost Gallup, like you say, he had a revolving door for an offensive line. And he's also coming back from a season of injury, as well as picking up an in-season injury as well.
Yeah, yep. I mean, obviously, Dak's self-assured. There was obviously, a lot of pundits were questioning what Dak was going to be from day one.
Yeah.
And Dak has come in. Obviously, he wasn't expected to do anything season 1. Then Kellen Moore breaks his foot in training camp.
Yeah.
Tony Romo goes down in week 3 of the preseason against Seattle, and you're suddenly, you're suddenly thrust into the lineup, and obviously we go 13-3 that year, and get the first seed for the playoffs, and unfortunately, we were one and done or whatever, but again, it was. Dak has always had that confidence in himself, and that's what you need from a quarterback, particularly your starting quarterback. And even when things were against him last year, the players gravitate towards that and build off that atmosphere. And, again, when you saw Dak on the sideline, and helping Cooper Rush, helping Will Grier or Cooper Rush certainly in Hard Knocks. He was doing a little bit with Ben Denucci as well.
Yeah.
And obviously we got something out of Cooper Rush this year, and that we've seen him in game action that isn't just mopping up at the end of a game. We actually saw him play in a game. And when the chips were on the line again, he guided us to victory over the Minnesota Vikings. So we have a level of confidence with Cooper Rush this year. Whether that's enough for him to, will he win the battle against Will Grier in training camp? Who knows?
Yeah, well, we'll get to Cooper Rush in literally just a second. The only thing I wanted to finish on with Dak is what you foresee. But also, what we'll do is very quickly run through his contract with how it ties in at the moment. Is that it's obviously a 4-year contract. He's in the second year of that. It was 160 mil. That now ranks 10th in the NFL. There you go. That went fairly quick. 29 years of age. He does 2-year void part on his contract at the end of the 4 years. In 2022, he's only 19.7 mil against the cap. I know they restructured, but I think that was a bit hefty. Especially when I think they rank 10th in total cap space, if I remember. 2023, that takes a steep jump then to 49.1 million against the cap. Whether they're trying to keep as much of that cap space available for next year because you can use rollover, could be what they're trying to do. But it is interesting that there's this $30 million jump next year that they're going to have to account for, along with Zeke's contract and Tank's as well, because remember they restructured his. Yeah, very interesting in that respects. I think personally he's worth the money. When you talk about the rankings, the way, and especially when you think you're going to have more quarterbacks at the end of this season having contracts looked at and their next contract beyond their rookie contract getting done as well. So we're going to see this jump again.
Yeah,
But yeah, the last part before we finish with Dak is me personally. I think this season, Dak's going to get a lot of the blame for some of the issues that will happen this year on the offense. It's just my initial thoughts without going into camp and seeing a single ball being thrown. This is mine, just a feeling. But hopefully, if some wide receivers, like you say, Talbot steps up, you still got Dalton Schultz there. CD Lamb's going to be a very important role, which we'll talk about when we get to wide receivers.
yeah,
But as it stands right now, I mean, I don't think the Cowboys have done enough to help Dak this year. But if he can step up to the plate and he can do what he needs to do, it'd be very interesting to see if he can elevate the team. That sort of become the truck rather than the trailer type quarterback.
yeah.
But what's your outlook for him for this year?
Well, I mean, again, obviously, the criticism that gets regarding the money is that obviously Jerry never signed him earlier than he
Yeah.
did, and if he was playing the third year of a contract where he was only making $25 million a year, we'd be saying it's an absolute steal, no matter
Mhm.
whether it's one and done in the playoffs or whatever. But the fact that it dragged on as much as it did, the fact is he's not, we're not overpaying him compared to some. Obviously, his contract has been surpassed by everybody else now.
Oh yeah,
Um, you know, from that point of view, but being the quarterback of the Dallas Cowboys is always going to be
a target on your
it,
back.
yeah, it's a target on your back more
Hmm.
so than being a starting quarterback anywhere else in this league. I suppose Green Bay maybe when you're switching out the like of Brett Favre for Aaron Rodgers, and Aaron Rodgers, a lot of people were
Hits
like,
the
"Oh my
ground
God,
running.
what's he
Yeah.
gonna like?" When Aaron Rodgers eventually goes off into the sunset and Jordan Love or whoever's there come in, there's going to be as big a target on their back as there is for Dak.
This is true.
Um, but I think Dak's. You look at the other quarterbacks in the NFC East. You got Jalen Hurts,
Yeah.
who realistically, yeah, okay, he guided the Philadelphia Eagles to the playoffs,
Hmm.
but there's still a lot of criticism about him and his skills. You've got Carson Wentz, who basically is on his third team in 3 years, never never managed to recapture that MVP season that he was having until he went down injured.
Mm.
Even when he was reunited with Frank Reich, um, perhaps if he hadn't messed up that final game against Jacksonville, he'd still be playing for the Colts. But who knows? Um, you know, the Colts have never beaten Jacksonville for about last 6 or 7 years or so at Jacksonville.
Hmm.
So it wasn't purely Carson Wentz's fault. And then um, Daniel Jones, I've never been high on anyway.
No,
So Dak is still certainly the best quarterback in the NFC East,
agree.
and there's no doubt he's one of the perennial top players in the NFL at the quarterback level.
I would definitely say he's a top 10 quarterback. NFC East, definitely the best. And you're hoping that by having the best quarterback, that's enough to take you and carry the rest of the team into the playoffs. I agree.
Yeah,
But you touched on the other guy as well, Cooper Rush. He is 29 years of age, same age as Dak. 1 mil against the cap this year, just slightly over. But he is an unrestricted free agent next year, which is quite interesting, be depending on what they decide to do with that one. I don't know about you. I feel after the Vikings game, a lot more confident with him as a backup. I mean, how do you feel about him?
Oh, 100%. Because as I say, we'd never seen anybody, or we'd never seen Cooper Rush play before, other than mop up duties.
Yeah,
I don't think he'd thrown more than sort of 4 or 5 passes a game.
this is true.
And again, you saw from him that the first half was so. It wasn't great, and then he connected with Cedric Wilson.
Yeah,
That boosted things, and that took his game to the next level. And obviously, he had that confidence on that last drive to come in and actually knock guide them down the field. Pass to, I think it was Cooper who caught the final touchdown
I
with
think it was. Yeah,
about a
actually.
minute to go.
Yeah.
So again, that game was the making of him. Probably puts him in a better steading than Will Grier. Certainly,
Hmm.
obviously, there's limited game tape of Will Grier when he was playing for Carolina. Um, and obviously, Kellen Moore knows what Kellen Moore has that idea of what Cooper Rush is, because he's basically trained Cooper Rush from day
Yeah,
one.
yeah. That's true.
So if you're going to be leaning towards anybody, it probably is Cooper Rush. But again, both of them are just making over 1 million.
Yeah.
It's going to be a straight battle for them for number two. And I can see this year us just having two quarterbacks in camp. Maybe a third one on the practice squad.
Yeah, it's definitely, and like with Cooper Rush, I feel confident with him having to take over the most part of a game, or at least a game if needs be. If Dax had to take a game out, I feel, but I don't want him to go on a long stretch of games of like 2 or 3 games. Like you say,
Yeah,
finishing games out can do. You feel confident with that, because bear in mind this is Cooper Rush. He's a guy that the Cowboys um, randomly have during his tenure at the Cowboys. Um, they've cut him. He's cleared waivers. They brought him back in. He's cut, put back onto the practice squad. Then they pulled him back out of the practice squad and brought him in. And then there's all the COVID rules. So you've got rules on what you can do with players on that as well. So they've got this mixed feeling on him. But I think the Minnesota game certainly has helped solidify him as the number two. Because you brought the other guy in as well, Will Grier as well, West Virginia, that came in. He's on a 1 million against the cap this year, unrestricted free agent as well, 27 years of age. I know you said that there's a possibility. For me, I don't see it, because I just don't see Will Grier. He works well on a West Coast offense, but I think a lot of what Will Grier did, and I can remember saying this a couple of years back when he was there, is that Will Grier is a good college quarterback, and all the traits and tools you have are exactly what you need to have to succeed in college. The trouble is not a lot of those traits work well in the NFL. Like, he doesn't have a big arm, but a lot of people will say about the touch. He has great touch on the ball. And I just think, well, yeah, I mean, that's great for college because it does work, because you're playing against A, lesser athletic cornerbacks, and B, ones that will give up a lot of defensive pass interference calls on these touch passes because of poor technique. But in the NFL, where the athleticism is higher and they get an NFL coaching, those touch passes become a lot easier to defend, and in some cases end up going the other way. So
yeah,
that's why I was never a big fan of Will Grier coming out, and I always had issue with him. Now, I love to be proved wrong, and Mike McCarthy is somewhat of a quarterback whisperer. Um, and like you say, there's nothing tying either of these quarterbacks in terms of Rush and Grier beyond this season. The only thing I will say is that Grier will be the younger guy, and this Cowboys team is very young as it stands as it is. So it'd be interesting to see what they do. For me, the of all the quarterbacks, on this year's roster, the one that needs to have the best and cleanest preseason, especially preseason games where he needs to stand out, is Will Grier.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, because obviously the Will Grier was a pickup after the final cuts of training camp.
Yeah,
You know, there's nothing to stop Dallas doing that again this year. You know, and obviously at the same time that Cooper Rush shouldn't think that he's got the job settled as well. I mean,
agree.
obviously we were all saying that the job was going to be Garrett Gilbert's right up until the final week of training camp, and
This is
then all of
true.
a sudden it was Cooper Rush got the job. So
Yeah.
um, the only one that is guaranteed to have a place is Dak, and
hmm
that's as much as his abilities, rather as well as where the money is. That there's no moving on from the money side of things. But at the same time, you know, Dak has the skills and has the potential that he is the best quarterback we've got on the roster. So he's definitely solidified his place. Cooper Rush, Will Grier, they're both
In
you
a
know,
battle.
expendable. So
hmm
they shouldn't be thinking, oh yeah, I'm guaranteed a spot this year. So
Yeah. And
um,
neither of them are really tied to this coaching staff. So
yeah,
they got no worries. I know you say they're not really tied, but yeah, it was this coaching staff that brought them in through free agency, but they didn't draft him. They've just brought him in.
yeah,
So if they cut him, there's no like loss. Nobody's like, oh right, or finger pointing in that you're wrong. Um, and what we do like, and we say it every year, where it's good to have competition. This is a place where it is good to have competition as the backup quarterback. A lot of people in the chat, as well as on Twitter. By the way, guys, your comments don't show up on Twitter, so head on over to YouTube, our channel there, or Facebook, and they will come up on the screen. But what is interesting is that a lot of people are saying how much they like Cooper, and it is right. I'm with these people that Cooper as a backup quarterback is totally fine. It's funny to say Cooper without thinking of Amari Cooper, but
yeah,
um, the competition is good. We like that, and it's also because one of the things the last guy we'll talk about is the Ben Denucci experience. 26 years of age, 800K against the cap, and his year in 2023, which is interesting. A lot of people are saying to cut Ben Denucci. I get the reasons. I understand he has not shown or flashed at all. But I am keeping him for camp and for preseason only because of that reason is that he's going to create competition, which means that if he starts to step up, the other two guys now need to step up.
yeah, yeah. And I mean, obviously, if you were going by past experience, you know, we never saw anything from years 1 and 2 of Tony Romo, and in year 3, suddenly, you know, the
The
mechanics
lights
had all
came
been
on.
mechanics had all changed, the lights came on, and
Yeah.
you got something out of him. I think you certainly go to camp with him,
hmm
see how he does in camp, and if he's improved, great. You've got a three-way competition for the backup. If not, you've at least got a camp body. You've got somebody that you know you're not putting back in for the whole game in
hmm
preseason. Other than obviously the dress rehearsal, and obviously teams are having to tinker with that with
Yeah.
the reduced number of preseason games that you're having.
Exactly. Yeah.
Um, so potentially, you know, you've at least got the insurance policy that you've got three backup quarterbacks that can play a whole game, and take it from there. See who the best one is. See who survives preseason, um, and you go into the regular season with that as well. But I we haven't seen enough from him. Um, you know, if our backups were solidified, perhaps he's already out on the street. And if these guys that we've signed this week for rookie minicamp, if one of them suddenly is lights out,
Imagine it. Yeah,
you know, you could see them swapping out.
yeah.
We just don't know at the moment. But again, I would say Denucci's on the outside looking in at the moment,
I'm with you.
unless he has taken that next step.
Yeah, because I think that this is really it now. I know he's still on the hook for next year, but they can cut him. There's like nothing there. I think the only thing holding them back from being like, yeah, we messed up, or not that we messed up, because remember, he was a 7th round pick. So it's not
Yeah,
like there's a huge investment in this. You went out and got him, like, because to me, when I've seen Ben Denucci play, and I'm sure everybody else does, that if you just let your eyes watch the game, he looks like an FCS quarterback. It's the only way to describe it. That
yeah,
is exactly what he looks like. He just looks like a guy who's come from the FCS. He's got awkward mechanics. The game's moving too fast for him. He's not even doing half field reads. He's doing a single read and then he's gone. It's got either he's throwing the ball, which ironically is something Will Grier needs to do more. But he's doing that or taking off, and it just all goes wrong. And you can just see it all unfolding and becoming too quick and it's too fast for him. So I just think that for me, Ben Denucci, this is the season where it's all on the line. But I don't foresee it. I can't see him really progressing much more. I know we're saying, McCarthy, they do have a good quarterback room as well as coaching on that in that department. Plus, he's got Kellen Moore, who played quarterback himself. So you do have all of that. But I think Denucci, I think, is pretty much this is it now. This is done for him. Preseason, they might give him a pitter patter of sort of snaps, but I feel really they're going to go down the road of let's see what we can do with Will Grier. Let's teach him to, if it's not there, throw the ball away. Don't try and make awkward throws. They'll probably instill a bit more of a Westy Coast style offense for Will Grier, which suits him better because he doesn't have a big arm. And even on the short passes, they can fall short. Oh, man. But, these are the things that they can do. And I just think that how do you change the offense for Will Grier is a lot harder to try and rack your brains to figure out than it is, say, with Cooper Rush or even with Will Grier.
yeah,
And there's not great money, as I say, invested in it. So I think the Denucci experience, because I even ourselves, and as I say, it's a 7th-round pick, so you're not really digging or delving too deep into the narrative of what the pick was. But a lot of us were, what was that pick about? Why this guy from not even a good FC? Well, okay, it's a fairly good FCS team, but why that pick? Why, and a lot of people then turn around, especially who are ex-Green Bay Packers fans, or is like, it's Mike McCarthy. He will always pick this guy. Plus, he knows Ben Denucci. He knows the family. And then you stop clogging it all together. And you go, oh, right, okay. So maybe he knows more than we know. He knows more than the rest of the scouting department know, and they're signing off on it. But I just think it's one of those things that just hasn't worked out.
yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, as you say, Mike McCarthy has been known to take a flyer on a player in the latter rounds of the draft. You've seen the Brett Hundleys, you've seen numerous quarterbacks, and they played one or two games when Aaron Rodgers went down with injuries, but I think he's too raw.
He is.
And
it's true.
Hopefully we've seen some coaching the last couple of years that might mean that it clicks into gear this year. But we need to see how it comes together. But yeah, it's a low risk pick, we've already, because we cut him and put him on practice squad last year, we've already absorbed any of the guaranteed signing
Yeah,
bonus
yeah,
money. So he literally, we can cut him, and there's
for
no
nothing.
salary cap penalties at all. So
Yeah,
um,
because I just
y-
think that they will, if anything. I don't know what you think. I think because of where they both come from in terms of Ben Denucci, Will Grier, I think they're just going to try and spend some more time trying to help and develop Will Grier. I don't know. What do you think?
yeah, I think so too. I mean, you've at least seen game tape of Will Greer, and he. I think what did Denucci in is the fact that he was Denucci to me. What that first game he played was like the first series of steaming Willie Beeman in any
Yeah,
given Sunday,
yeah. All
and
he needed to do
he's
was
coming
throw up
in
on
and
the
he's sort of
field.
Shane Falco in the
Yeah,
replacements, and he's
yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
going to
Going the
hand
wrong
off, and
way.
the
Yeah,
play's gone the wrong way, and he's running around, looking for something to happen. And unfortunately,
yeah.
as that Philadelphia game went on, it just it didn't
Awkward.
click. It
Yeah,
it didn't improve. And
and it's becoming awkward to watch.
yeah, and
Yeah.
again in last year's preseason games, you were still seeing that you
That's
weren't seeing necessarily any sort of improvement. He threw more interceptions than any of the other quarterbacks in preseason.
yeah, yeah.
And guys were calling for his head last year. How he managed to stay on the practice squad, obviously there were people querying why we were even bothering to keep him on the practice squad, especially when you'd pick Will Greer up as your third string quarterback.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, McCarthy must have seen something to keep him around, or whether it's we talk about how Dallas are loyal to their draft picks and that
Mm,
pretty much everybody was there. Bradley and I was the only one that eventually left mid-season to go somewhere else.
yeah.
Um, but basically, all the draft picks are still there from 2019, the first time that
Mm,
McCarthy got to pick. So,
yeah, yeah.
um,
Yeah, yeah, I'm with you. I just think that and they're going to have obviously two quarterbacks on the roster, and then Will Greer will, if I think he is still eligible because he hasn't taken enough snaps, that he will move to practice squad,
yeah.
and he's there then for, as they say, COVID purposes and all the rest of it, because that's still in effect. Or have they got rid of that rule now? Are they on about getting rid of that rule?
I think most of the COVID stuff's gone, but I mean, I
Mm,
think there is obviously there always with the new CBA that was agreed, there always was going to be the expanded practice squad.
yeah, yeah,
Um,
that's right.
a lot of teams actually liked some of the rules that came in with the COVID and
Mm.
elevating players and what have you.
How
So
many times you can do it?
um,
Yeah.
I think potentially, I think there was talk about making it carrying it on, and I don't know if it was agreed at the owners' meetings or if it even needed to be agreed at the owners' meetings. But there certainly was talk of at least carrying on the elevation, and
Mm.
you were, as long as one of the guys that you were elevating was an offensive lineman, you were going to be able to take 8 offensive linemen to the game,
Yeah. Yeah.
and still elevate somebody else. So,
Mm.
um,
But
and
I think go on, keep going.
well, COVID's not going away, so at some point you are probably going to have somebody who does go down with COVID and needs to be sat for a week or whatever. So you'll
Yeah,
need to elevate somebody as a
hasn't gone away.
COVID replacement. So
Yeah, it still exists. You're quite right. But yes, I think this one's fairly easy, where we do predict the roster position. Fairly easy this one to go through. The QB1 is Dak, and your backup's going to be Cooper Rush. I think
yeah,
this is fairly simple. Will Greer, it does, as you quite rightly say earlier, has a chance to make a push for that. But I think as it stands right now, because you've got a known history with Cooper Rush, with what you've seen. You know what you're getting. Will Grier, yeah, it's a possibility. If not, if anything, he'll make it to the practice squad. And we'll see where it goes from there. So that is it for this week's one. Quarterback, fairly easy one to start off with. But that's what we like to do. We like to get in gently. And then as the season gets on, it gets more and more tougher and a lot more meatier. Plus, we've got more news ripping in. So it fills everything out a bit more. But let's hit this, and I'm going to let you do the read on this one. It's over to you, Mr. Lawn.
Okay, so obviously schedule's been released tonight. If you're not enticed by any of the international series games, consider going across to the States and going to, if you are going across, book with cowboysexperience.com for your ultimate meet and greets, tailgating, game day packages. Again, they'll work with you. You get to meet former players like Randy White, Ed Too Tall Jones, Zach Martin, Travis Frederick. Paul's always raved about them. You get stadium tours. My cousin is out there at the moment and sent me a whole load of videos this last week, just to wind me up that he was actually going around the stadium. So it's certainly putting a thirst under me for signing up for next year. So, and of course, if you are booking with Cowboys Experience, use the discount code UK Cowboys, and of course you'll get
free stuff. That's right. And then you've got some other guys we need you to go check out. These are some friends of the show, been on the show, talk with us, and give you some good advice, especially this time of year. Could come in handy when you're trying to figure out who you're going to take on your fantasy squad, which is coming soon. So yes, that is it from us this week. We will be back next week, and we have a special guest as well. Everything coming out from minicamp reports, where we get to see how the rookies have done. We'll talk about the schedule as well. But from myself and the great and powerful Lorne, who joined me tonight, that is it from UK Cowboys TV. See you next week for the running back position. Stay safe, guys.
Yeah, have a good week, guys, and we'll see you next week.